Good morning, everyone. We welcome you with love to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Manhattan. Our vision is that we are a vibrant, inclusive congregation widely known as a safe haven and a force for social justice. Our mission is to be a diverse, evolving, spiritual community acting for a better world. My name is Mark Mayfield, and I'm convening this morning's program on behalf of the Call Process Task Force. Now, I know that's a mouthful, but you're going to find out more about what that means if you don't know already. But our group is blessed with the privilege of leading the congregation through the process of transitioning our relationship with Reverend Isabel Call to one of called ministry. Specifically, today we aim to start the process, the phase of congregational involvement in that process. And you will learn more about what that means today and be shown how to participate in the process. So we will address the relevant ideas of storytelling, our Unitarian, our fellowship's history, and crossing thresholds just before we do our reflection. And during the program, we invite you to be engaged and inquisitive and to think about your role in the process. We hope that whether you are a member or not, you will find this content to be interesting and engaging. So thank you for being here. Now let us humbly acknowledge those who occupied this land before us. Lauren?
Good morning, everybody. You can hear me, I guess. Thank you, Mark, for your edits on this draft of the land acknowledgement. As the Reverend Dr. Pastor Isabel has noted in past land acknowledgements, we recognize the people who occupied and were forced to leave this land where we gather. These are her words. We express our gratitude to members of the Kaw, Osage, and Pawnee nations who gathered in circles here long before we were known to this land. And we acknowledge the 4 federally recognized Native nations who call Kansas home now: the Prairie Band Potawatomi, the Kickapoo Tribe of Kansas, the Iowa Tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, and the Sac-and-Fox Nation of Missouri and Kansas and Nebraska. Now, in preparation for this service, I've been thinking about Riley County as our home, storytelling, as Mark suggested, and crossing thresholds in many ways, including traveling. I've also learned a lot from Dr. Deborah Bolton, who I'm really glad is here today, who I believe is, well, you're not zooming in, you're here. So thank you for being here and for sharing your depth of knowledge, a love of the precise use of language, and enthusiastically helping me to develop an idea for a project to which this acknowledgement will refer. Implicitly, our acknowledgements include all the Indigenous people who crossed this land and who may have considered it part of their domain. I recently learned that Chief Standing Bear of the Ponca Nation traveled to Nebraska from Oklahoma in January of 1879 to bury his son who had died from malaria. Chief Standing Bear had escaped the Indian Territory reservation, the reservation in Oklahoma, and traveled with a few tribal members. As he made his journey north, he camped in Riley County on a site not far from our UUFM property. I think it's just right around the corner down the road, down Zendale Road. I find this story compelling because it weaves together the power of home, community, and family commitments, and crossing boundaries. And a historic legal threshold is crossed during this event as it unfolds. The U.S. Army captured Chief Standing Bear in southern Nebraska and brought him to trial for leaving the reservation. But a sympathetic general allowed 2 attorneys to represent him in the case. He's allowed to make a statement on his own behalf and says, "My hand is not the color of yours. If I pierce it, I shall feel pain. If you pierce your hand, you also feel pain. The blood that will flow from mine will be the same color as yours. I am a man. The same God made us both. End quote. The judge finds in his favor in this case. And the judge in this case had granted him legal standing to speak for himself and to be represented and to pursue the case. He gave him standing to chief standing bearer by allowing him to make that statement. This may have been a first for a key legal issue, and makes this an extraordinary legal precedent, a landmark case in US civil rights law. So my purpose here in sharing this story is simply to expand our knowledge of local history and our hearts as we continue our collective spiritual journey. And again, in Pastor Isabel's words, endeavor to make amends in our lives and in the life of our community. On to the next item.
Thank you, Lauren. Now it is the time to light our chalice. Christy Lanius will lead us in the response of love, words by Maureen Killoran.
In these hard times, let us look first to the response of love. In the midst of challenge, may our chalice flame bear witness to the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. In the midst of uncertainty, may our chalice be a beacon of encouragement that our values may guide our choices. Let us look first at the response of love. Now, please rise in body or spirit as we sing together hymn number 118, This Little Light of Mine.
Now we invite those young and young in spirit to join Kat Colburn in our story for all ages, What We'll Build, Plans for Our Future Together by Oliver Jeffers.
There it goes. All right. What will build plans for our future together? By Oliver Jeffers. I chose this story because I thought it was great for us as adults just as much as it is children. Oh, no, it's all right. Okay. Yeah, I got it. I don't have to show everybody the pictures here. What shall we build, you and I? Next. Let's gather all our tools for a start. For putting together and taking apart. Let's build a door where there was none. We'll build a house to be our home. I'll build your future and you'll build mine. We'll build a watch to keep our time. We'll build some love to set aside and build a hole where we can hide. A fortress to keep our enemies out and higher walls for when they shout. But you don't always lose and you don't always win. So we'll build a gate to let them in. We'll build a table to drink our tea and say, I'm sorry, me too, me three. We'll build a tower to watch the sky and other worlds that pass us by. Let's build a tunnel to anywhere. Let's build a road up to the moon. Let's build a comfy place to rest, for we'll be tired soon. Let's build a boat that can't be broken, that will not sink or be cracked open. A place to stay when all is lost, to keep the things that we love most. We'll put these favorite things beside the earlier love we set aside. I think that we may want them later when times are hard and needs are greater. But first things first, let's build a fire, for we've planned a lot and now we're tired. It'll keep us warm like when we're born, then we'll say goodnight as all's all right. These are the things we'll build, you and I. Just think of all the things we can do together.
Thank you, Kat, for helping get us closer to the threshold. So now it's time for our offering. And here at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Manhattan, our offering that we receive on Sunday morning goes to a chosen organization each month. This month, our Helping Hands recipient is the Kansas Abortion Fund. You can donate online by going to UUFM.net and clicking on the donate link and choosing the particular fund to which you want to contribute. If you are here in person, you can simply put your offering in the basket. I'd also like to invite you to use this time to share your joys and sorrows this week. You can write those on the papers on the table in the back. There's some scattered throughout the sanctuary as well in the seats in front of you. And we will share those afterwards, both on Zoom and here in the sanctuary. Those who are on Zoom can type something into the chat. And then I will come around and pick up the ones in the room. And now Renee Brown will take us away to the mountains with her performance of Appalachian Sunrise by Wayne Gratz. Thank you, Renee. Um, We've come to the time in our service when we share our burdens and amplify our conversations. Let us call up a spirit of generosity, vulnerability, courage, and compassion as we listen to what has been shared. There are no names on these. I know that one was Pat, and I think it was. We heard a very wonderful piano concert on Friday with our UUFM member Slavomir Dubjansky at a special room in Hill Library. And this one was, Shirley Hobrock. A big joy to celebrate. Last Sunday, we had 5 people join us as new members. Wow, that's exciting. So now, Karen, do you have any joys to offer from the Zoom land?
We have no joys, nor have we sorrows in Zoom land. So we will join you in celebrating what you've presented.
Thanks, Karen. No sorrows here in person either. So let us join in silence as we honor the joys and sorrows that have been shared and those that remain quietly within our hearts. So now we've come to the point in our service where we will offer a somewhat unconventional reflection today. So as I mentioned at the beginning, today we want to kick off the process of calling our minister. And the first thing we're going to do is have a short history from Christy Lanius, and then Amy Fiorilli who is the pastor at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Belfast, Maine, will share a short video reflection. And then finally, the Call Process Task Force members will come and sit here and demo a small group conversation, which we hope that everyone here will be engaging in as well in the near future. And then we'll follow. Did we forget the hymn? Okay, let's sing a hymn. Sorry. Oh, yeah. So I'll summarize. Our first, Christy will come and give a short history of the fellowship, and then that will be followed by a video reflection by Reverend Amy Fiorilli of Belfast, the Unitarian Fellowship of Belfast, Maine. And then finally, we're going to present a short demo of a small group conversation, which is the process we're going to use to bring everybody into the call process.
Okay. So, sorry, Mark, I thought you were also going to kind of remind folks sort of where we're at in the process. So the call, okay. It'll be a little impromptu this morning. The Call Force Task Force first convened actually last fall. We're tasked with leading the congregation through the process of deciding whether and when we would invite Pastor Isabel into a called ministry. She is now a contract minister. So that's the big picture of what we're doing. When we were planning this service, I very confidently volunteered to provide a history of the fellowship. That was a folly. That was a folly. I vastly underestimated the time it would take to do such a thing. So, which is not to say that I haven't made a good faith effort. It's just to say that there's a lot there and it's a rich history. And at this point, maybe I have a dim grasp on knowing what I don't know, right? So I think the time that I spent diving into the history of UUFM, time well spent, but in some ways left me with more questions than answers. Having said that, it also then ignited in me a deep curiosity to learn more and a passion to continue gathering histories. So just going to plant that seed. But let me back up and say just for a little bit about why I volunteered to do that, though it turned out to be a folly. The Call Task Force, we met with someone who kind of a counterpart of our group from the congregation in Belfast, Maine, a woman named Chris Legore. And she was very generous with her time in meeting with us and answering our many, many questions about how that process went for their congregation. And some of the questions that I asked her had to do with the history of their congregation. So they called their minister, and we'll meet her in just a moment, Amy, virtually anyway, Amy Fiorilli. They called her in 2021, so relatively recently. And so we thought, oh, this will be helpful to talk to somebody, a congregation that has recently done this. And so I asked her, was this your first called minister? Had you had a called minister before? How long has your congregation been in existence? And several more questions like that. And she readily rattled off answers to those questions, and it was very helpful. But I had a meta-level moment in realizing I don't know the answers to those questions about our congregation. And it feels like knowing that history would be really helpful in guiding us into the future. So that's what set me on this path. And during that conversation, some folks on the task force and Pastor Isabel pointed me to some materials that have been generated over the years, materials that are on the UUFM website. So I spent several hours reading a lovely document and looking at some amazing photos that were gathered in it, called The First 40 Years, The History of the UU Fellowship of Manhattan, Kansas, from 1957 to 1997, written by Brock Dale and edited by Charlie Kempthorne. It's a wonderful document and full of surprises for me. First and foremost, that I did not realize that the congregation had roots that went back to 1957. Took me a while to just sort of absorb that, and it was wonderful to see some photos even from that era. The group was very much, I think it's fair to characterize the founding group as being having an ethos of independence and a DIY kind of approach. I learned that the group searched for a while for a permanent home, and that in early days they met in people's homes. They met in the cabin or house in Girl Scout Park, adjacent to Sunset Cemetery, which is my neighborhood. So it was lovely to hear that. And also the group met for many years at a beauty school on Points Avenue, a building that's still there. And I meant to notice what it is, what it now is, but it's very centrally located next, right kind of on the main drag there, before eventually buying a first property on Bluemont, 709. I looked it up on Google Maps. Yeah, Larry affirms. It was fascinating to read about the many years then spent in that location before finally purchasing the old Oak Grove School in 1983, I believe. And then the process of having it renovated. Turned out it was handy to have among the membership members of the architecture faculty who very generously agreed to design the renovated, to lead the renovation of this space. Because that document, the first 40 years, concluded in 1997, and I think it was in the early aughts then that it took a while then to write that and to get it out, but that was prior then to the building of this physical space, as I understand it. So I don't know if anybody in the audience can ballpark when this space was built and maybe then the new kitchen. Okay. Okay. So 2001. This document also included a couple of recipes. Apparently it was a tradition for many, many years to have an Easter brunch, and the kind of set menu for a long time was creamed eggs and a fruit compote. As a food lover, this was exactly the kind of detail. This was like catnip to me to see. Just it gave me a sense of the group and their rituals and how they came together and what they did together. I also learned that it wasn't until 1994, I think, that David Grimm became the first UUA minister, just a quarter time, and shared with a congregation in Topeka. So it was getting to that point in the history, right? It took from 1957 to 1994 to have even a part-time UUA minister. And that's a big part of what I meant when I said that the fellowship then has this long-standing history of independence and a DIY ethos. And I think that's one key thing to keep in mind and to understand as we move forward into the future, right? To think like if that's a long-standing approach or values, how might we maintain that, right? Keep that in mind as we deliberate about moving forward at this moment of being in a time of change. So 1994, David Grimm. And then I kind of pieced together that maybe around 2005, Reverend Michael Nelson came. And I believe I pieced together that it was around 2015, I think, that he retired. I found in the minutes, I think, from a membership meeting, a discussion and a vote to grant him emeritus status in 2015. And then I think Reverend Jonalou maybe was after that. I don't know if there was anyone in between there. Okay. And then that kind of brings me up then to my time, right? I've only been here for 5 years, been a member for 5 years. My family and I moved here in 2018. And so Reverend Jonalou was the minister when I came, and if I remember, her title was developmental minister. So that's my super beginning tip of the iceberg, look back through that history. I am not an historian, but I would love to work with a group, and I know that there are some historians around here, to gather some oral histories. Because another thing that was really striking and really resonated with me was in that first 40 years history, seeing names, many names of people who are still here, and are many of whom are sitting in the fellowship today, and probably some more on Zoom. So folks who have firsthand knowledge of and experience with that long arc of the history of the congregation, I would love to capture their observations and the wisdom gleaned from that, from participating in the fellowship over that long stretch of time. So I want to wrap up by reading the last paragraph from that document, the first 40 years. And again, written, so these are the words, make sure I get it right. These are the words of Brockdale. We have persevered for 40 years. A few of us have spent most of our lives as members of this fellowship. We have slugged our way through a number of crises and have emerged from each one, by and large, stronger than before. We have preserved diversity, an essential attribute of a Unitarian congregation. There is more variety in our membership than there was 40 years ago. We're not through with crises. We can see, even now, dimly on the horizon, circumstances that will make it necessary to take on a full-time minister. And one day, our beautiful building will be too small. Likely, when these crises arrive, we will prevail. We always have. So those words really, burrowed in to me. And I find it comforting to read that even 25 years ago, the fellowship was thinking about its future self and circumstances, and the inevitability of change and the opportunity for growth. So I think in reading those final words, felt like they were kind of speaking to me here in the future. Now, I don't know if I would use the language of crisis as Brockdale does here. Instead, I like the language that that we've been using today and that Pastor Isabel has been using of late, language of thresholds. So I see us poised at a threshold, and as a congregation, we're deliberating on how we want to proceed into the future. And I think that the more that we can draw on the solid ground of our history, the better off we'll be in that endeavor. So our next step is to show the short recorded homily from Reverend Amy Fiorilli.
And I just want to quickly say that you're far too humble, Christy, because I think that was a wonderful, wonderful dive into our fellowship. And for anyone that's been here 5 years to know that much and to be so interested, I think it speaks volumes to her contribution. So thank you so much. And now we're going to hear from Reverend Amy Fiorilli of Belfast, Maine. She's a newly called minister, as Christy said. And if
Hello, UUFM. My name is Reverend Amy Fiorilli. I'm the minister of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Belfast, Maine. It is a great joy and honor to have been asked to share some thoughts with you about the contract to call process that you're currently in. Thank you to Mark Mayfield and Amy Betts, and of course, Pastor Isa for the invitation. I recently went through the process of shifting from a contract minister after 2 years to a called minister. I was called in September of 2021, and I had my installation ceremony in September of 2022. My congregation is about 28 years old. We have about 131 members, and I am their second called minister. Their first called minister, they went through the traditional call process, search process. And that minister stayed with them for a solid 7 years before retiring. Then they had an interim for a year, which did not go so well. And so they invited me in for what would have been their second year of interim work as a contract minister, with the understanding that it could lead to a called ministry. I told them that I would do contract ministry for 2 years, and then I'd like them to consider a called ministry, and that would give us enough time to figure out if we were a good and healthy, vibrant fit together. The questions that Mark asked me to address were twofold. What does being a called minister mean to you and your fellowship? And how does being a called minister make a difference to you and change your approach to ministry? Being a called minister means to me that we are both, the congregation and myself, out of the job interview process. Sometimes contract ministry can feel like one long job interview where you're constantly asking one another, do we still like each other? Is it still working? Is this going to be the year where we decide something different on both sides? It also means that we can look further into the future together, look at our mission and see what can be accomplished together with our own skills, the congregation's skills, my skills, and really confidently think we could make this happen because of who we are together. That makes a huge difference. It also means to me that we're saying to one another, congregation, I trust you. I trust you to do the work that you need to do to be the people you want to be in the world, and to treat me well, and to collaborate and partner with me. And I think that it means the same thing. I hear in this decision to call me a sense of trust and joy and commitment, that we're going to see each other through some hard times, and that that's going to be okay. we use the metaphor of the dance of shared ministry a lot in my congregation. Renee Roshatsky wrote a beautiful piece called The Dance of Shared Ministry. We refer to it often. It was in my installation and the service before the call vote. And so most particularly, it talks about times when you stumble or you step on each other's feet, and when the steps feel really awkward, but you choose again to pick each other up or to keep dancing. And that's really what the call vote has meant to us, I think, me especially, that we're choosing to keep dancing together, and that we'll get through any stumbles and missteps. It's an act of faith, and again, an act of deep trust. Being a called minister probably doesn't change the way I minister. I was always all in, and I gave my whole self to my ministry. But there's an unnameable quality. Maybe it added a little bit more confidence to what I was doing, a little bit more of a sense of, we really are in this together. And I know that when I'm feeling grounded and solid and centered, and I know my place, it's easier to make healthful, growthful choices. It's easier to see when to step back and when to step forward. One of the jokes we make often is that moving from contract to called ministry is like living together and then getting married. Nothing really has changed, and yet everything has changed. That's sort of how it feels. So I am able to rest in the knowing that we're in it for the long haul. And I'm motivated to work hard and to think about the future, because we've chosen one another, and we've stated that it matters that we work together for as long as is healthy and good and right. And who knows how long that will be. But it feels like a powerful statement and a partnership in a whole new way. So I wish you all the very best in your own discernment, in your own process, and in your own journey. May whatever you choose serve the highest good for your fellowship and also for Pastor Isa. I wish you the very best of luck. Thanks again for having me. Blessed be. Good morning.
Well, as you can see, this process of moving to calling a minister is much more than just a change in the contractual relationship. And I appreciate Reverend Fiorilli for providing those comments. At this time, I'm going to invite the call process task force members to the front, and we will engage in a short demo dialogue that is to sort of show kind of what the small group process might look like, small group conversation process. And so to explain that a little bit more, over the next, 2 weeks or so, we're going to set up some meetings, meeting times for you all to sign up. There's going to be we're going to show you a link, and you'll get this, I'm sure, in many ways, to a Google form where you can sign up. You will also have some paper copies in the back to sign up. And these, so we have several different times. We have Zoom format, we have in-person format here at the fellowship. And you will come and engage in this small group process, which is designed to gather feedback from you, the members, in a sort of collective way, and allow the call process task force to come up with a recommendation regarding the call. Another way that you'll be able to participate besides these small groups is by sending in anonymous comments as well. We think that's an important way And that'll be via another Google form that you can use online, and it's completely anonymous that way. And I think unless one of the members wants to remind me of something I've forgotten, I'll just go ahead and have you guys come on up. And I think Amy was going to do something right beforehand. And I don't have the microphone anymore.
Yeah, hi, I'm Amy Betts. I'm the current UUFM board chair, and I just wanted to introduce everybody of the task force and just give a big thank you. So we have Linda Johnson, Kat Colburn, Lauren Clement, Christy Lanius, and the chair of the task force, Mark Mayfield, and they really have been just doing tremendous work to figure out what does this process mean, not just in sort of the general term, but actually going through all the UUA guidance and actually understanding what do we have to do, what is expected of us. And that's just a huge undertaking. And I'm just so thankful that one, I could find 5 members of our congregation that would say yes back in an email, but then that they've also just done such a fabulous job. So thank you.
Is it on? It is. Okay, good. I find it very interesting, having watched the video and listening to Christy's comments, that our congregation is quite a bit older than the congregation in Maine, and yet we have never had a called minister. We've had half-time, quarter-time, part-time. We've never had a full-time called minister, and that is what we are considering right now. I'm the facilitator for this group discussion, so I welcome everyone here. At the beginning of a small group discussion like this, like the chalice circles, we would light a chalice, but since that's already been done, we don't need to do it right now. And today we're talking about issues related to the future of UUFM, where we want the fellowship to go, and what kind of pastoral leadership we need. First, we need to remind ourselves of the covenant that is used in this kind of discussion, the same as we use in the chalice circles. As a circle, we agree to follow the format presented by the facilitator, to speak in rounds, in other words, everyone have a turn, to allow for learning and to respect our covenant. As participants, we practice deep listening, speak with gratitude, and look for connections to our own experience, to monitor our participation and either move up or move back. In other words, no one talks too much or too little. And we honor confidentiality. We also will assign someone to take notes. In this group, we don't need to do that today, but we will normally assign someone to take notes. And it's not necessary to write down who said what. Just make note of the major points, and especially of points of agreement among the group. And then that will be given to the task force to be combined with all the other results they receive. We've written a set of questions. Are those appearing? No, they're not on the screen, but we have a set of questions for groups and individuals to consider in deciding whether or not to issue a call to Reverend Call to be our called minister. That's a lot of calls, isn't it? Rather than a contract minister as she is now. The first we'll consider is what particular ideas, goals, dreams, or visions do you have for the fellowship that Reverend Call should address if she becomes our permanent called minister? Kat?
I'm here so that we can gather in community, and it's something that I really enjoy. As a person that grew up in this fellowship, I really appreciate some of our history, and so when I look for a minister, I think I look for someone that can really pull us together as a community.
I'm thinking about Isabel's work and crossing thresholds and going beyond land acknowledgements as words and actually getting to activities. So I'm thinking as a landscape architect of a project, but that's probably coming in a little bit.
Well, I feel that it's important and in our best interest to be good stewards of the environment, and I would like to see us be proactive in our efforts to green our existence, be leaders in the community, offer activities, programs, garden, et cetera. And this is a special area of interest for me personally, but I gather it has wide appeal among members here.
I like what everybody has said so far, so I want to start by saying yes to those things. And so like Kat, the community is important to me. Like Lauren, I like the idea of moving from words into action, building on the work that the fellowship has started to do around the land acknowledgement. And like Mark, I also, the idea of greening really appeals to me. Food for me is big. I have really enjoyed being a part of a Happy Kitchen team since not long after we joined the fellowship. It brings me a strong sense of community. It feels good to be a small part of feeding folks with food insecurity. With Tom Phillips stepping down as our coordinator, I'm really deeply invested in making sure. I would like to see that work continue. And so when I think about if we move to a called relationship with Pastor Isabel, I'd like to see her help us work through that and make sure that the Happy Kitchen teams continue and maybe even expand, thinking about working with Common Table more generally. One other final piece that comes out of what Mark said, food insecurity, I think, is a big issue in our community, and I love that we also participate in. Now I'm not gonna. My brain is blinking about the mini food pantries. What are those called? Blessing boxes. That phrase was just not going to come. Thinking about the blessing boxes, and I like also stocking those, and our son Porter have found that that's a way to kind of bring him in and introduce him to this kind of work, is having him go with me to the grocery store and pick out canned goods. But I frequently have a moment then when I'm thinking about those canned goods, I think like, oh, I would like a way to have more fresh food available as well. Thinking about edible landscaping. So thinking about what Mark said about gardening, and the community, the campus that Susan and I were a part of back in Wisconsin was very, it was a robust sustainability kind of program there. And one of the things that folks did was, rather than planting flowers, annuals, and there were lots of perennials on campus as well, but took a lot of the beds and planted vegetables there that were then available for anybody, students, in particular, but also community members, to come and harvest over the course of the summer. And it was beautiful and bountiful. And then had lots of participation, including community members. So thinking about that as a project. So these conversations have got me thinking about all kinds of things we could get up to.
Okay, so it goes back to the beginning.
just as a little transition, thanks, Christy, for weaving that all together. And it did remind me of seeing such things in, I think it was Portland, Oregon, where there were like vegetables planted downtown in various patches like what you're describing, where you would normally see annuals and so on. That's a great idea.
Well, we have the Department of Landscape Architecture at K-State that is, with Lee Scabland and others, engaged in this kind of work on the campus to try to green the campus up there. So certainly that would be a way for us to draw more people, and especially perhaps younger people, to the fellowship to develop this kind of a grounds landscape design that includes food and community activities. So that's very, very exciting. I'm thinking about sacred ground now with the Indian, the Native American acknowledgements and ownership of this land in prior times, and what we can do perhaps to mark our ground.
On to the next question. What should be our focus as we move forward in the next year? Some possibilities are social action, spiritual growth, growth of the congregation, and improvements to the facility. And there are others. Mark?
After all of that, it's what we just did with the first question. It sort of sounds like we're on the same ground, right? What should be our focus forward to the next year? It sounds like we have some priorities already laid out. I also think that it's important that we think about our work to solidify our financial situation in the fellowship. It's something that I'm sure that all of us think about from time to time. And so in other words, if we're going to extend an offer, if we're called ministry, we probably ought to, be sure that we're thinking about the financial situation that requires. Anyway, so yeah, Christy.
I think for me, growing the congregation, and I think, Mark, it feels all kind of chicken and egg to me. That's how I'm thinking about this, that growing the congregation presumably is a way we can help increase, better our financial situation. And the sort of chicken and egg, having a called minister is also connected in there, kind of connected up with both of those. On the one hand, a called minister, then we would need to presumably have more income, but it all kind of circles around in my mind.
That makes me think about, I thought I had about Isabel as our pilot for a plane that's flying and repairing the plane while it's in flight, or strengthening the plane while it's in flight. I think she's done extremely well with so many things that maybe that's really not suitable, but I just want to reinforce the idea of attracting younger people. This came from some longtime members, and I think it really is a very high priority. So this community garden idea, other activities that we can do that really engage young people is so important. I would just reemphasize that. That I guess is my contribution at this point.
Yeah, I think I echo a lot of that, which is just engagement in general. I think a direction that we could move for me that I would like to see is just engagement for our current members, and then also engaging our community to grow our congregation, both young and old.
I'm very supportive of social action, which we've seen in action in our community just very recently with the Kansas Interfaith Action attempts to influence the legislature, which is difficult at best. And I think the support we have provided for the Afghan community is another example of our social action, and I'm very proud of all of that. I do think we also need to remember the importance of pastoral care taking care of the needs of this congregation and new people who are drawn in. It's important for us to interact with one another. Excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat. We will go on to answer the rest of the questions in our survey that we have developed. And we are not going to go through all of the questions this morning, but we want all of you to sign up to find a way to engage with the process so that we can all take part. And we hope you will all answer the questions individually or else join in the group. So that will be the end of our model discussion this morning.
So, yeah, that's our model, our demo for the small groups. And but I wanted to spend, if any of you have any questions whatsoever about the process, specifically, ask right now. We're going to put up a slide shortly that will show you the link. It's a memorable link, so you shouldn't have any trouble with it. But yeah, let's do that right now. A little quick question and answer.
A little reminder on the microphone use. A lot of you know this. This is a directional mic. So if you hold it like this, it's not going to come across very well. If you speak directly in line with it and about a hand's width away, then that'll make it easier for Dan to monitor the volume and all that. So please remember that when you're talking.
Does anyone know why we have not gone through this process with previous ministers? Because I know at least one person was minister for almost 10 years, right? And John Alou for several years. So why did we not do this before, and was it discussed?
Hold on. Yeah, so starting out, the answer to that, I'm not real good at the history, but I can tell you that there was definitely, this was a traditionally lay-led group, and just bringing the first minister in was a big step. For a lot of people didn't want that for various reasons, as I understand it, but I don't know if there's somewhat, anyway. Then Michael's relationship, or David Grimm's relationship was more or less of the same. It was a contract, he was a very part-time contract, and then Michael's was part-time as well, Michael Nelson's. And then when John Lou came in, she entered as a developmental minister. All these definitions are available at the UUA website. But anyway, developmental minister is to kind of explore the possibilities, I think, in that direction of calling ministry, but not calling a minister. I don't remember all the details of why we didn't go straight to called ministry at that point, but I know that John Lou wasn't someone that wanted that with us as well, or at least I don't gather that that was the case. So she came with the understanding that called ministry wasn't in the four. So does that help? Yeah. Anybody want to add to that in the group? Yeah. Microphone? Oh, sorry. Sure.
Will the small groups be on Zoom or in person?
The small groups, there will be, I think there's two. Both, yeah, both. But I think there's two Zoom sessions currently. Times. Yeah, you'll have your choice. And we can expand the Zoom times if people prefer that as well.
Further answer to your question, Joe, my understanding, such as it is, was that when we hired John Alou as a developmental ministry, it was to sort of get us to the next level, but that she always said out loud that this was her last job. She intended to retire when she was done with us to begin with. So that was, I mean, I think a lot of people would have loved to keep her and call her, but that was never on the table.
A developmental ministry by UUA standards is a 6-year term with specific goals and time for that minister to fulfill. It is not an optionally called or contracted position.
Thank you, Betty.
I think I also saw flash by on the chat that there were issues about could we afford a full-time minister. As you know, people give according to their ability and their desire, and it's a concern even at this point still if we contract with, or if we call Isabel, what are the financial implications of that?
She's already
right.
a full-time.
No, I realize that, but there are long-term implications, and there are other implications in terms of this being a transient community where we have people come in and out because of their affiliation with the university, because of their affiliation with the military. There's a lot of I've been here about 10 years, and there's been a lot of turnover between people moving away, people who are deceased, being replaced by new members, but there's constantly that kind of movement. We seem to have hit a certain point when we talk about growth that has been very difficult to move beyond in the past several years.
So this reminds me that if there are questions from the chat, I don't want to neglect those folks as well. I don't know if Dan, if you can turn them on with the sound.
Sylvia has responded. I was chairperson and on the search committee when we
just turn on their mic. Does anybody turn on their input there? Yeah, there you go. Let's see if they have.
Can you hear?
Yes, we can hear.
Okay. Sylvia Beeman says, I was chairperson and on the search committee when we got David Grimm as a part-time minister. We did have discussions about what we expected or what we wanted from a minister's presence. We did not have enough money to afford a greater commitment from a minister. Topeka was in the same boat. That's why we shared a minister. Finances have always been a consideration in hiring a minister. And then Emily Frazier added, finances, yes, but also the pandemic hit.
I mean, I think all of this discussion is very healthy and stuff we need to be thinking about, right? What I really wanted to do here was questions about the process itself. And so go ahead, Christy.
I just wanted to add a little detail to in answer to Shirley's question. So we have many possible times for folks to sign up to be a part of a small group, some daytime, some evening, some weekday, some weekend, some in person, some on Zoom. So with the idea being that trying to offer as broad a range as possible can then give people choices.
Looking at the time, I think we need to go out to our hymn, Building a New Way. Thank you, guys. Okay, go in peace and sign up for a small group time. Thank you. Yes, the slide is coming up. There's going to be first a QR code, but there's also a very short bit.ly link as well. And so you're going online to do this, or you can sign up on a paper form in the back right now. And it's also on the, yep, it's on the back of the program.